Matt Kroenig, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. Are we going to have a situation where Russia actually uses a nuke in Ukraine?
Well, Ben, it's always a pleasure to be back, and I wish I had better news, but I think the world is closer to nuclear use now than it's been probably in our lifetimes. I've been saying I think a 20% chance that Putin uses nuclear weapons in Ukraine.
Do you think that that's something that has been diminished at all by the Biden administration's policies toward Ukraine and toward Russia, or do you think that they have accelerated the likelihood of that?
It's been a mixed bag. Early on, I think the Biden administration's signaling was making things worse. Biden saying the U.S. military option is off the table altogether in Ukraine. Maybe that's good policy, but that's not something we want to tell Vladimir Putin. We want him to worry about that. And a couple of weeks ago, John Kirby, NSC spokesperson, said if Putin uses nuclear weapons, that would be really bad for him because radioactivity might blow back into Russia. And I remember thinking, Putin doesn't care about that. He's perfectly willing to
Not even a little bit.
Not even a little bit. But, Jake Sullivan on the Sunday shows maybe 3 weeks ago I thought was really good. He said there would be catastrophic consequences. There would be a decisive U.S. response. And so I think the kind of tough but vague threats are the right way to go. Make Putin fear the worst. Make him worried.
This is a core question that I have for you, though, because the general impression has been that the Biden administration has backed off of the typical approach to deterrence policy going back decades that says, any kind of use of nuclear weapons is unacceptable and would result in an immediate response that would be, equally, on that same level. The Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, a number of other places have all reported that the message that has been sent to Russia has been, if you use a nuke, then the United States will engage to a greater degree in the war effort in Ukraine. They will, supply more weapons. They will, participate in terms of flyovers. They will do all these other things, which is not the same, obviously, as normal deterrence policy. Do you think that's the wise move?
Yeah, I guess I'd make 2 points. One, the fact that this is in Ukraine, a non-ally, does make things more complicated. If it was Putin nuking Poland or the UK or Japan,
sure,
I think the policy is clear. The fact that this, we don't have a defense commitment to Ukraine makes things complicated. And, if Putin, we've already said there would be catastrophic consequences if Putin uses nuclear weapons. So if, this reporting is right, and what we would essentially do is more of the same, more sanctions, more arms to the Ukrainians. I think this would be like Obama's red line in Syria from 10 years ago, but much, much worse. I don't think anybody thinks more sanctions is really catastrophic consequences. So I think Putin would look at this and say, essentially, I got away with this. Let's use 2 or 3 or 10 nuclear weapons. I think Kim Jong-un might say, hey, we can use nuclear weapons now. There's no real consequences. So I do think that if Putin used nuclear weapons, our response would need to be tougher than just more of the same.
I want to shift to the Chinese sort of focus. The experience that I think a lot of people had was looking at that footage of Hu Jintao being removed from that meeting and trying to decipher what that meant. What did it mean to you?
Well, the big takeaway for me is it shows that Xi is in charge and most powerful dictator in China since Mao Zedong. And so I think he's eliminating all competition, including his predecessors. And I think it means for the United States that this likely will mean an even more confrontational Chinese foreign policy. And so the United States and its allies need a serious strategy to deal with the threats that Xi and China will pose.
Mike Gallagher has written a piece in the Wall Street Journal talking about the need for an anti-Navy when it comes to the Taiwanese experience. Tell me, what do you think the United States posture ought to be toward Taiwan at this moment? Learning the lessons that we have from Ukraine about the need to make a potential, something that could be scarfed up by an enemy, potentially more prickly, more difficult to deal with. What should we be doing now in terms of our lessons learned from that?
Yeah, well, Congressman Gallagher is great. He's a Georgetown PhD, so I'm proud of that. And he and I worked together on a presidential campaign in 2016, so I liked his article. We got into war in Ukraine essentially because Putin miscalculated. He thought it was going to be easy, and so he went ahead and attacked. And I'm afraid that Xi may make the same miscalculation in Taiwan. He may think this is going to be easy, let's go ahead and do it. So I think U.S. strategy needs to be to disabuse him of that notion. So the first step is having a clear declaratory policy, and the Biden administration has really not followed through on that. The president says something, one day, and then his White House walks it back immediately thereafter. So that incoherent messaging is a problem. But then the other piece is that we do need a military strategy that could prevent the Chinese Navy from attacking Taiwan. So I think Congressman Gallagher is exactly right on that. The only way they're going to take Taiwan is if they move large numbers of troops over on ships. And so if we have the ability, as even Obama's Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, Michelle Flournoy, the way she put it, is we need the ability to sink the Chinese Navy in 72 hours. And I think that's right conceptually, but we're not building the military to do that right now.
One of the things that is obviously a talking point comes up very frequently within the world of Fox News commentary and others as well, is that we have a military right now that is embracing wokeness to the detriment of its ability to fight wars. That essentially it is, engaged in all of these different kind of social justice or signaling kind of experiences in ways that are a detriment to their ability to function as they are needed. And I have to say, I don't think I'm betraying any confidence in saying this, that having brothers and brothers-in-law who serve respectively in the U.S. Army, the U.S. Navy, and in the Marines, I hear this constantly as something that they complain about. And they complained about it, regardless of what the media attention was to it. How do we correct something like that? How do we readjust? Because I think the vast majority of the American people want a military that can function and that can do its job.
Well, I think the way you change it is with new leadership. And if you look back to the 2018 National Defense Strategy under Secretary Mattis, one of the key themes was lethality, that the Department of Defense needs to be focused essentially on killing people and breaking things. And, that's what they do best. And so it's not a place to carry out big social experiments. It should be focused on defending the country. And I think it might take a new administration, a new Secretary of Defense to prioritize lethality again.
Mm-hmm. I certainly hope that that's something that's prioritized. Looking forward, we have a situation in these current midterms where you're likely to see a vast number of outsiders elected to the U.S. Senate, some of them who have foreign policy views that are vague, some of them who have foreign policy views that are distinct in their break with Washington, D.C. How much do you think that they will actually change the foreign policy perspective of the Senate and of Washington in terms of the simple challenge of the fact that they have 3 or 4 or 5 members depending on the outcome of this election and not obviously a plurality even?
My guess, maybe my hope, is that their views will change more than their views will change Washington. And I say that because I think that, despite the mistakes that the United States has made, its overall strategy and approach to the world is basically the right one. And I think when they get to Washington, they build foreign policy teams. They talk to their colleagues. They get briefings from, Pentagon and elsewhere. I think they'll understand the threats, the real threats this country faces, and the need for the United States to take an active role in the world. Because if we withdraw, it's not goodness that's going to be filling the vacuum. It's going to be our enemies who want bad things for us. So I'm hopeful they'll learn.
Last question: the Progressive Caucus of the U.S. House, had this letter that they put out regarding Ukraine. One that was, basically, it became controversial. It was withdrawn. They said that it essentially was released without approval. What did you think of their perspective on that? And what do you think about the likelihood that that is going to have any kind of truck post-election with this White House?
We all know the lesson of Hitler at Munich. We tried to appease a dictator and it didn't work. And essentially, that's what this letter calls for. Hey, let's just give Putin some of Ukraine. Let's sign a peace treaty and get this to settle down. And I think there's no reason to believe that will work. If we sign a ceasefire now, Putin will just rearm and try to take the rest of Ukraine later. So I do think we want a strong support for Ukraine. A president like Reagan would have loved to have Ukrainians, just destroy the Russian military for him. That's what we're doing right now. It's a good opportunity for us to weaken one of our biggest enemies. I don't know. The Biden administration's basically they've done the right thing on Ukraine, but 2 months too late. Mm-hmm. And so I guess I'm basically guessing that's going to continue. So they're not going to go as far as the Progressive Caucus wants, but I think they have been a little too cautious.
We'll certainly see, where they go from here. Thank you so much, Matt, for joining me today.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Ben.